Hey everyone, my name is Patchworker and welcome to the 12th episode of Patchworker Produces. Today I'm going to break down my track called Summer Vacations at Home, which I created during the summer vacations at home. So I wanted to create a lo-fi hip-hop track, but also adding some unconventional, weird, and interesting sound designy elements to it, so that hopefully it's not too boring to listen to. And in this video I'll just break down what I consider to be the most interesting. So let's just jump in the introduction, which sounds like this. So there are a few interesting things in here. Perhaps I'll start with the main drums. It's just this one very heavy snare and it sounds like this. And so I wanted to have a very gritty sound, and to achieve this result, I made this little rack here that introduces some redux effect. So if I play just a dry signal, it sounds like this. Actually, with no effect at all, it sounds like this. I added a saturator and then this audio effect rack, but it sounds like this now. And on top of this, I added this redux chain here that adds the very grittiness of it all. So if I solo it, it sounds like this. And I mixed it with the dry signal so that together they sound a bit more gritty and heavy. Next we have some percussion elements. They sound like this. And the way I created these is actually quite simple. Basically, I took a few drum loops from sample packs. I think it was from a drum and bass sample pack. By themselves, they sound like this. And I just chopped up the parts that I consider to be the most interesting, and I created this sort of interesting percussion rhythm that comes on top of the beat. Maybe the last interesting thing in the introduction happens here. So there's the main melodic sample, which sounds like this. So the main interesting thing here, besides the audio processing, which I will touch on in a minute, is the gate audio effect here. Basically, I have this chain called trigger up there, and it's just a very loud click. It's turned off at the moment, but if I turn it on, it sounds like this. So it's this very loud click that peaks way above 0 dB. The gate audio effect here takes an audio input from this trigger. So every time the trigger goes click, the gate detects it, and it lets the audio from the main sample through. So basically each time there's a trigger up there, the sample is played for a tiny bit of time, and this is what creates this interesting rhythm. Let's move on to the main drop. It sounds like this. So, there's nothing too interesting in the drums, it's just a kick and a snare. I have some top drums too. The most interesting things happens again in the main sample, in my opinion, and it sounds like this. So in order to give you an idea of the amount of processing after this whole thing, let me just play you the original sample as it is. It sounds like this. So I started by dropping it 1 semitone and 35 cents to have a bit of a darker sound. And then I added this whole audio effect rack. And let me just turn all of these off one after the other so you can hear the difference. I started with a bit of multiband compression, some flanger and phaser, an OTT. And the main interesting things happens here in this pitch shifter. It's a pitch shifter by kilohertz. I think it sounds really good. And basically with this pitch shifter, I pitch shifted the entire sample an octave up. And I mixed in a tiny bit of this octave up with the original sample so that it sounds way brighter. So this is before. and this is after. And I really like the sound of it, but it still needed a bit of housekeeping, so I removed some annoying frequencies. And then some last touches to make it sound prettier. So you can hear that the sound is pretty different from its original sample. So this is how I messed around with the main sample. So let's move on to the bridge section. It sounds like this. So as you can hear, there's some weird stuff again that happened, and this is what I wanted. So there are the same percussions as before, but chopped up a bit differently. The main interesting things happens here in this sort of weird group that I actually called weird, yeah. It sounds like this. And so if I turn off the audio effect rack down there and play the original samples that I created for this part, they sound like this. So basically I messed around with, I think it was fracture or hysteria, and also some beat repeat or so to arrive to this kind of sounds. So with this weird sample, I made this little chopped up version, and then I added this audio effect track here with a delay, some OTT, and some reverb to further bring this sort of weird and delay-ish sound of it all. And it sounds like this. And that's without the effects. Here's with. So that is basically how I created this weird part. Maybe the last thing I want to talk about is this synth here. It sounds like this. And so as you can see, there's a bunch of effects as well here. First of all, I created this chord progression that I like. Then I threw in an arpeggiator, and the sound itself comes from a serum patch. So it looks like this. So there are three main interesting things happening here. The first of them is the wavetable position that is modulated by the LFO here. If I bypass it, it sounds like this. So this adds a bit of movement to the sound, and it's further emphasized by the warp setting here that is also modulated by the LFO1. If I turn it off and turn the sync off, the warping off, it sounds like this. And the more I turn it up, the higher the sound will go. So I just found the sweet spot and modulated it with the LFO so that it sounds a bit weird. And lastly, there's this distortion here in downsample mode that is also LFO'd by the LFO1 for its drive. And if I turn it on and off, you will hear that it adds this sort of bit crushy effect to the sound. So this is with and off. So this is how I created this patch. Otherwise, I just added a sub bass that plays throughout the track. It's just a sine wave, basically. A few effects here and there you go. This was the track Summer Vacations at Home. I hope you could learn something out of this video and that you enjoyed watching it. I think this might be one of the last episodes of Patchworker produces. Now I want to focus a bit more on bigger and full-fledged projects, like for example like EPs or so, stuff like that. So I think I'll quit the monthly video and music format. I might come back to it later on, but you can expect some more things coming up soon. In any case, thank you for watching. My name is Patchworker, and I'll see you next time.